So welcome back again to the Now Morning Show. This is your Body and You segment. Now we are looking forward to the Easter weekend, and of course, you know, we love the beach. But one thing we always sometimes are not too concerned about is the effect that the sun can have on our skin. So in studio with me right now, I have a dermatologist, Dr. Naomi Dolly, who is actually an American board certified dermatologist, and we're going to be talking about Easter weekend, more so how you can protect your skin from the sun, what is the right SPF to use, and of course, what is the best clothing to use to protect your skin from those rays. Dr. Dolly, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us on Now.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Kimberly.
Now, Dr. Dolly, first of all, SPF. We have it in all different numbers. We have SPF 30, we have SPF 50. Is there a specific one that we can use, and does it depend on the skin type that you have as well?
So SPF is actually a ratio of the length of time it takes for your skin to burn if you're wearing sunscreen, and then you divide it by the length of time it takes for your skin to burn without the sunscreen. So it's a very random ratio, because you would imagine different skin types would be affected differently. Particularly when we refer to SPF and we're referring to a burn, we're actually only referring to the UVB rays. So the sun emits everything from UVA to B to visible light. It's only really giving us a measure of how you're going to burn, which is important to understand, because as much as the Skin Cancer Foundation may recommend an SPF of 30 or more being safe, we have to always remember that an SPF of 30 is only telling us how well we're going to burn, which at the end of it, that may give us an indication of our chances of developing skin cancer. We have to remember that there are many other rays that are emitted by the sun, particularly the UVA. So many times people may say, oh, I've been to the beach, I wore an SPF 30, I wore SPF 50, but I still tanned. But that's because maybe the sunscreen you were wearing was very good at protecting against the UVB rays by having a high SPF, but you didn't look for the marking that said UVA coverage as well, or you didn't look for that marking that also said broad spectrum coverage. Because when you use a sunscreen, particularly in Trinidad where we're so close to the equator, you have to not only cater for UVB, but you have to look at something that can give you a very broad spectrum of coverage.
So UVB and UVA, is it like a different rays that's hitting the skin?
Yes, it's a different range. So it's just it's a spectrum of light,
right,
and it has different ranges in terms of the wavelength. So UVB tends to only affect the top layer, which is what's most likely causing your skin to burn. That's, you know, when your skin peels and you feel really good. But at the end of it is really the UVA that's really giving you that tanned look. And then the UVA, because it penetrates deeper, it can also cause a lot of aging of the skin. So the wrinkles and some of those unwanted changes in the collagen may be triggered by UVA.
Right. Now, of course, there's the talk of melanin, right? Because we're darker skinned, we're able to sustain the rays and stuff. But does the sun affect different skin types differently?
It sure does. I think which is why I said it's a very random figure with the SPF, because you would imagine someone who has more melanin may not burn as fast as somebody who has less melanin, but then it's just a ratio that's given on a bottle.
Right.
So, but even with that, we always have to remember that the amount of rays that penetrate, how to explain, the longer you stay in the sun, the effects of those rays sort of can overpower or outlive the ability of your melanin to protect. And we also have to remember that the melanin is just kind of like a shield, but then it also produces chemical reactions in the skin that then, if that chemical ability of the skin is exhausted, then you're just somebody who doesn't have any melanin.
Now, how does clothing factor into all of this? Because, of course, we're here in the beach. We want flowy, we want light clothes. What are some of the best clothing we should wear to protect our skin from the sun?
So it's actually called UPF safe clothing. So that's like what you need to look for. And it's actually not flowing and it's not clear, because we actually say if you don't have UPF safe clothing, to know whether it is UPF safe or any sort of measure, I always tell my patients to take it up, lift it up to the light, and if you can see the light, then it's not protecting you.
Right.
So it is very different to most of our resort wear, which tends to be very light and flowing and the sun just goes straight through it. But if you're not sure, it's always good to reference to see if the clothing is UPF safe. So the typical factor, you may see it says UPF 50. Sometimes wearing a simple hat may not be enough, because it may not, or a cap is what I explain to patients, because some hats are straw, and we like to wear straw hats when we go into the beach because maybe it looks better.
Guilty.
But it may not necessarily give the level of protection that's required to prevent a burn, to prevent tanning, to prevent aging, and then inevitably to prevent skin cancer.
Now, doctor, how do we find that balance between getting the required vitamin D and protecting your skin from the sun?
So first of all, the sun is not the only source of vitamin D. We get vitamin D in the daily foods that we eat. Sometimes I even tell patients, you could always take a vitamin D supplement. That's sort of like a guaranteed amount. But I never tell patients don't go in the sun. I just think you need to pick when you go in the sun. Nobody likes to go to the beach in Trinidad when it's 7 in the morning or when it's 5 in the afternoon. But I tend to tell my patients that will be when the UV index is the most safe. So the UV index is just an international standard that's used that gives a general guide as to how powerful or how strong the rays of the sun is. So it starts from like 0 and it goes to 11 plus. So if UV index is thought to be moderate from 6, but I'm a little bit cautious.
Right.
So I don't like going in the sun when it's as low as 4. And just remember that the UV index, again, does not incorporate, it may incorporate UVB and UVA, but it may not incorporate what's called visible light. And we need visible light in general. And visible light is now thought to have a lot of activity in our brown patients and our skin of color patients. So we really have to pay attention, not only to UVA and B, but we also have to pay attention to the visible light.
So, doctor, those who want to go to get that tan, to get that tone and that bronze look, is that a no-no?
Definitely no. So the tan look is not, I know a lot of times it's considered a nice look, or you look healthy, you look great, but you have to remember the reason why you get a tan. So there are actually 2 forms of tans. There's the immediate tan, which is you go in the sun for half an hour, you come out, you look dark. So that's your immediate tan. And that is just because your body already has melanin. And the melanin moves from where it was at one point in the skin and it moves to the top surface. So automatically you get that immediate tan. But then there's that delayed tan that comes many days later. And that sort of tan so I say it might be a little bit more protective because it indicates that your body has ramped up production of melanin. But we have to remember that within that time of producing more melanin, how much damage has happened to your skin, is it really worth it?
Yeah. Now, we only have a few minutes left, doctor, but I wanted to know, we always hear about one of the damages or even one of the effects of like extreme exposure to the sun is cancer. But what are some of the other things we need to look out for that extreme exposure?
So there's also heat stroke. We tend to underestimate what heat stroke can do, because that's just not just your skin getting hot. That actually can affect your cardiovascular system, your respiratory system, and goes into complete shock. Because what happens is your body sort of overheats, and then your whole body is trying to cool it down, and a lot of dilation of the blood vessels happens on the skin, and then you get a lot of what we call shunting of the blood. So people with heat stroke sometimes end up starting to feel very cold, and that can cause a lot of shutdown of vital organs. It tends to happen in waves. You tend to see it, in addition to UV index, in some places they tend to say high chance of heat stroke, stay out of the sun. So that's something that I always tell patients you have to be aware of, aside from just skin cancer.
Now, only a few seconds left, Doc, but just tell us again, what can we do to protect our skin as we're going into the Easter season?
Wear sunscreen with an SPF an SPF of 30 or more that says broad spectrum coverage. Make sure you're wearing UPF safe clothing, and when you decide to go in the sun, make sure it's prior to maybe 8 in the morning and after 5 in the afternoon, and pay attention to your UV index, because that will give you a closer guide as to when it's safe and not safe to be outside.
Dr. Dolly, thank you so much for joining us. You really, really enlightened me, because I am guilty of those straw hats, but thank you so much for the information that you shared with us.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're on the Now Morning Show. We have a lot more. Stay with us.